The Baton Rouge Police Department's maximum allotment, or the highest number of officers it should have to protect and serve the capital city, is 698. In the past few years, however, that number has only decreased given the career's low pay and high-risk job status. But locally, numerous sources confide and say it may be related to the current administration of the Baton Rouge Police Department.
Policies of the police department are not being enforced upon employees in an equal and impartial manner.
Cliff Ivey is representing Sergeant John Dothier, a 20-plus year veteran of the force. Due to the department's own policies, officers are not allowed to speak to the media on the department's behalf, which is why Ivey interviewed. Plus, the most recent termination of Officer Sire Creel may have been meant to serve as an example of what happens if you cross the administration and speak up. Creel eventually did win his job back with full pay. Then earlier this month, he resigned with this letter, with part of the reason being, quote, hostile workforce conditions.
The enforcement of the rules is based upon what type of relationship the bosses have with the working class.
Why is that a problem?
It's commonly said that police officers are held to a higher standard, and they should be. We don't dispute that. The administration of this police department should also be held to that higher standard as well, and they're not holding themselves to it.
Dothier once served in the Internal Affairs Division, even under this current administration of Police Chief Murphy Paul and then Internal Affairs Commander Myron Daniels, who has since been promoted to Deputy Chief. Ivey says his client saw the beginnings of what he believed to be disparate discipline when certain violations by certain officers were allegedly being slipped under the rug. It's why Ivey says Dothier asked to be transferred out of Internal Affairs, wanting no part in that. Now, though, the lawyer says the administration isn't even trying to hide their disparities. They're blatant, some officers getting away with things, and then going after specific officers for speaking up. It's why he says Dothier had to get a lawyer.
Do you feel it's retaliation?
Yes.
Why?
John Dothier is being successful.
Retaliation because when he left Internal Affairs in 2019, Ivey says weeks later, the department launched what he believed to be its first disingenuous investigation into Dothier. It's why Ivey says Dothier notified Chief Paul of possible policy and criminal law violations back in 2019. But in these obtained records, the chief's response to that complaint was, quote, the department does not intend to consult with an outside agency to investigate the allegations of your complaint. A records request into the city turned up no IA file or other interdepartmental correspondence regarding that complaint, meaning no investigation came from his complaint.
If you get a written complaint on an officer within your force, shouldn't a police chief want to investigate that?
Well, they're supposed to.
Rafael Goyeneche is with the Metropolitan Crime Commission based in New Orleans. Goyeneche has served as a prosecutor and now is a watchdog group.
The problem that you have is what the sergeant was complaining about was Internal Affairs, and Internal Affairs was basing their investigations based in part on the subject of the investigation's relationship with superiors in the department that could possibly be the chief as well. So who is going to investigate Internal Affairs? And misconduct is supposed to be investigated by Internal Affairs. So you would have to ask an outside agency to come in and conduct this investigation. And when you're conducting an investigation that could potentially involve the chief of police, there's nobody that works for the Baton Rouge Police Department that could conduct an investigation involving misconduct of the police chief.
Fast forward 2 years to 2021. That's why Dothier went before the Municipal Fire and Police Civil Service Board, asking them to investigate Chief Murphy Paul for allegedly having violated not only the department's policies, but that he possibly also may have violated the law. That hearing is public and recorded.
What I am suggesting is that when I made a complaint for multiple policy violations against members of the Internal Affairs Division. In writing, I made that complaint to the chief, and pursuant to Louisiana Revised Statute 40:2531, commonly referred to as the Police Officer's Bill of Rights, he was required by law to initiate an investigation into my allegations, whether he likes me or not, and he did not do that. He failed his obligation under the law to initiate an investigation. The reason I believe that is because he basically told me he wasn't going to in his reply to me, and a public records request that I made much later after all the deadlines had passed confirmed that no record of any such investigation occurred.
But Dothier's problems didn't end in 2019 with the internal affairs investigations. In fact, in his own words in the letter for request to the Civil Service Board, Dothier says he no longer wanted to be in internal affairs, alleging, quote, "I made the request for transfer out of frustration and disappointment when it became obvious that the new internal affairs commander, Sergeant Myron Daniels, brought a new and blatantly partial doctrine for enforcing policies of the BPRD. After realizing that I could not stop what was occurring, I instead opted to not be part of it and left for a new assignment. My feelings were widely known and I firmly believe led to what would soon cause me to be targeted for an administrative investigation myself." That brings us to February 2021, where officers working under Dothier, who is now back on the streets, asked for a supervisor to come out.
Initially, one of his officers had been dispatched to assist EMS. When she got there, East Baton Rouge Parish EMS had already loaded the patient into the ambulance, were prepared to transport him. Circumstances indicated to that officer that the patient was critical and may not live. So there was the concern on behalf of all that responded that there may be a crime scene involved in the house from where they believed EMS had taken him.
Unfortunately, though, Ivy says they were given the wrong address for the man by multiple people. They were told the house is empty and no one else lives there. It was all caught on the officer's body cameras.
He's 80 years old, and his brother identified that this was where he lives because he came to check on him.
No one stays here but my grandmother and I.
Well then, let's talk like this then. So now you can see why we're really confused. The only thing we're after is to see if somebody hurt this man. We don't think that there is, but we have an obligation to check in there.
That's all we was doing.
I had no idea
He wasn't
that
gonna
you were
scare
in
you.
there. We thought that this place was empty, okay? So there was a misunderstanding there, okay? With that being said, we have to go in there to see if
Where he was
it
staying.
appears to be a crime scene for the detectives to come out. That's all we want to do, okay? But now I'm a little confused because you're saying that gentleman didn't live here, but the information we have is that this was his house and there should not have been anyone in there.
Don't nobody stay here but me and my grandma. That's why I said give me my phone so I can call my grandmother. If y'all don't believe me, get a damn search warrant or something. We are the only two people stay here. I am pregnant. Why the hell would I sit up here and lie and say that somebody else stay here?
Man, we don't know that. That's what we're trying to find out, okay? Understand our confusion when they call us to investigate this, and we find you're not supposed to be in here, according to the information that we have. You're telling me a whole different other story, because so you can see why we're confused. This is an honest misunderstanding that we're trying to get to the bottom of, because that's what we have to do. We have an obligation to do that. Yes, ma'am. Hey, were you out here a moment ago, ma'am, when the ambulance and everything was here?
No, but I saw the ambulance.
Well, let me ask you, is he the older gentleman?
Yeah.
Where does he live?
Right there.
This house?
Yeah.
Okay, not this house.
No.
Okay. What is your name, dear? I'm Sergeant Dothier with Baton Rouge Police Department. I'm the supervisor for this shift, and I'm responsible for everything that happened here, okay? What I just found out, since we all arrived here late, and when the ambulance was backed up here and they were loading him in here, there was a miscommunication given to us from the medical people that they had secured, is what they call it, from inside this trailer, okay? His brother was here and said he had come home and found him unresponsive inside. We took the information believing that he was inside this trailer and that this trailer was unlocked and that no one was in here. Hold on, I want to finish explaining to you first. I want to make sure she listens. That's when you and I met each other. When I pulled on that door, I was waiting on them to come behind me. We didn't expect to find anyone in here. What I've just learned is that Mr. lives in that house right there, and we misunderstood, or there was some sort of miscommunication. When I tried to explain it to you, and I thought we had a crime scene inside of your trailer, and you tried to close the door on me, I stopped you and I pulled you out to secure what I believed to be a crime scene until such time as we could secure a search warrant for the residence. Between that moment, a few moments ago, and now, I've now learned what I've learned, and you have my deepest apologies that we were in the wrong place. As I said, as the supervisor of this shift, I am 100% responsible for what happened here. I want to give you my name, my badge number, and all my information, so if you wish to file a complaint, you're free to do so, and I want to make sure you have the right information and complain on the right person, okay? You do have my deepest apologies. This was a severe misunderstanding, and I'm sorry that it happened, but it did happen, and I take responsibility for any complaint you want to make, okay? Y'all have a pen, paper handy? I can write my, One thing I do just want you to know is that this was truly a misunderstanding, and we in no way intended to disrespect you. We were trying to secure a possible crime scene. I'm sorry it worked out the way it did, but the only thing I can do now is offer my sincerest apologies. This is my name, Sergeant John Dothier. This is my employee number. I work at 2nd District Supervisor, and that's the number to Internal Affairs if you wish to call and file a formal complaint on me. Once again, you have my sincerest apologies for an awful misunderstanding. We hate it when this happens, but unfortunately sometimes it does. And are there any questions I can answer for you at this time, ma'am? I apologize, okay? Thank you for your time. Sorry for the inconvenience.
And that citizen did follow through and make a complaint on Dothier. Here's the notification letting Dothier know Internal Affairs is initiating an investigation into him based on a citizen complaint. In April, Dothier and Ivy met with Internal Affairs to give their official statement and to respond to all 3 charges: body camera violation, failure to submit required forms, and conduct unbecoming.
The policy purpose behind that is so that the appointing authority, in this case the chief of police, can have a full set of facts before deciding whether to even set it for a pre-disciplinary hearing. The Internal Affairs investigator shut the recording off immediately after saying that the interview had concluded. We were in the middle of making statements at the time.
Ivy recorded that meeting, suspecting something like what happened may be the case. When Dothier tried to ask whether another responding officer at the same exact scene was under investigation for allegedly never turning their camera on.
Am I the only person under investigation for body camera violation in this matter?
You asked that question, I don't understand.
Am I the only person under investigation for not having a body camera on during this incident?
I'm not at liberty to divulge that information.
When Dothier tried to ask Internal Affairs why an officer who works for him got a courtesy call to remind him to turn in a required form, but he was never under investigation for it, why was it different when it came to Dothier?
The officer that works for you,
It is.
that he had apparently not submitted a, is it nameless warrant?
Response to resisted behavior form.
And he received a phone call from Detective Beard that day about a courtesy call to turn it in?
The same day that I was notified I was under investigation. That's right, 4 hours earlier.
Okay.
So I'm just making the point that it seems that, once again, I'm being treated differently than others. No, you can't conclude the interview. Part of this is me making some statements.
17.
That's what I thought. I'm going to work.
Arsenio, what the world is going on?
Cliff, the dude, me and John were cool at one point.
I remember.
For some odd reason.
Y'all took my law test.
Right, exactly. Exactly. I was one of the reasons I vouched for him coming into the office, but he has it out for administration. And since I work for administration,
I know where you are. I know where you
I
are.
fall into that. And like I said, I never had a problem with him until he left out of our office.
But I don't ever remember him saying he had a problem with you, so I mean, this can't be you.
Well, I mean, I have to do my job, Cliff.
I understand.
But, I mean, I have nothing against him.
And I believe that.
You know, the thing about it is he's always rude, and, I mean, and I understand, you know.
But can you see how somebody would feel when people who work for him get courtesy calls, and one day he does?
I'm not saying it didn't happen, but, I mean, and that's like, and you're an officer and an attorney, it's discretion. I mean, like, you stop somebody, hey, I'm gonna give you a verbal warning. Now, if I call it, I don't remember. If I did, I did. But to be honest, he and I didn't have a relationship like that. He even emailed me and said, hey, don't email me on my off time, so why would I call him?
I'd asked Sergeant Beard after the interview was over, or rather abruptly concluded, what was the true purpose behind this, and the answers I were given were quite disturbing. There were references to what type of relationship the investigator had with my client, and there were also references to the fact that the investigator felt he had discretion in terms of how he enforced policy, or the administration enforced policy, much akin to the discretion a police officer has when to issue someone a traffic ticket as part of a traffic stop.
When it comes to traffic tickets, police have some discretion there. When it comes to internal affairs responsibility is to investigate and document misconduct. The discretion about how to discipline that misconduct is with the superintendent or the chief.
The most concerning thing that was said was that because my client was going after administration, and that the investigator was a part of that administration, was one of the motivating factors, apparently, behind this current investigation.
Does that not say retaliation?
I don't know what else it could say.
Those comments by the investigator that were captured on tape are very damning. I think it's pretty obvious that this appears to be a retaliation for not playing ball with the chief and in fact embarrassing the chief.
What's wrong with that?
You're supposed to be making decisions based on the rules and the facts, and this internal affairs investigator's comments seem to substantiate Sergeant Dauthier's claims that this is retaliatory because he has in fact filed a complaint against the chief of police. And the investigator is aware of that.
A few weeks later, Dauthier is notified that his investigation paperwork is ready for pickup. Remember, he was fighting 3 charges. But to his surprise, this paperwork now included 3 more alleged violations. Class 3 violations, meaning the most serious. And the discipline for a Class 3 violation can be termination. Carrying out orders for a warrantless search and arrests, as well as use of force.
What do you think these last 3 charges are for?
The likelihood that they intend to terminate my client.
Why?
Because he, unlike many others, are successfully standing up for themselves against this administration.
What is he saying about this administration?
Well, the mere fact that he had to file a public records request and then had to sue to enforce the public records laws shows that despite the claim from this administration that they are both transparent and accountable, they are neither. The agenda is not tied to those 2 things.
Ivy is referring to this, pages and pages of a records request on BPRD turned over to Dauthier with just about everything redacted. 19th JDC Judge Trudy White, however, said that was against the law and that the city parish had to correctly redact the documents and turn them over to Dothier. Now let's get back to the civil service meeting, the one where Dothier had asked the board to investigate Chief Paul, alleging the top cop dropped the ball when he did not investigate his own in 2019 and may have violated BRPD policies and criminal law.
Yeah, may I speak?
Yes, sir, please.
I think two things I would like the board to consider. These are your words, Mr. Floyd. These are your words, Rob. This has never happened before. And I want everybody here to pay attention to that. This has never happened in the history of this board. Why is it happening now? Why is it happening now? And the fact that we're even entertaining this concerns me greatly. Mr. Maruzzi, I've received complaints on you for something happened a long time ago. Those same rights that apply to you apply to me as the chief of police. Here's the facts. We received a complaint involving this gentleman, Sergeant Dothier, on 2/22/21, where he violated, according to the complainant, their rights. This came from a citizen. It also came from the sheriff's department. Those are facts. I wasn't out there trying to target Sergeant Dothier. And you're going to hear, because I just read that report, and shame on him. That came from a pregnant person from this community. He want to open this up and make it like it's some personal vendetta. That happened. After that complaint was filed, part of our policy, we interviewed him. And when we interviewed him, he filed this motion for something that happened in 2019 and claimed whistleblower. So here's his intent, because I'm seeing it time and time again. And here's what's going to happen. I'm going to paint the picture. See, there's a discipline hearing that he just talked about that's going to happen. Okay, and these are the games that they're playing. So what's going to happen, he's probably going to get disciplined if the facts come out the way they are, or he may be cleared. We don't know. But if he's disciplined, he's going to come before this same board and say, see, I filed a complaint. I'm going to hide under this whistleblower. We know what you're doing. And it's the first time, and we're getting sick and tired of it, and I will not continue to be bullied by this man and the leadership of the Baton Rouge Police Union. I'm fighting back today. Today. Today we will fight back today. I'm tired of it.
After making those or disclosing those facts to the board, as he believed them, turned to my client, wagged his right index finger, pointed it at him, and said, shame on him. Now, one, our argument is there has to be some fairness at this pre-disciplinary hearing. The chief is supposed to have an open mind. Clearly, as of last month, he does not. Second, how have you not tainted the entire board to whom any appeal would be taken?
Since then, Ivy says Internal Affairs sustained or upheld all 6 violations against Dothier, suspended him for 60 days without pay, and demoted him in rank from sergeant to corporal.
Based on the chronology that was presented to me, I think there is every appearance that the department is being retaliatory. I base that conclusion on my review of the body cam footage. I watched the sergeant and the other officers be very professional and courteous to the woman that was handcuffed, and that's why I say that was a mistake of the heart and not the head. I think the officers received some misinformation, but acted appropriately and professionally, and I do not see the justification for the discipline that was administered to him in this particular case.
I do want to point out, one of the policies violated, the use of force, which is considered one of the more egregious violations. The department's own defensive tactics instructor says in this report that the instructor, quote, advised the physical force used by Sergeant Dothier was justifiable for the situation at hand.
Yet that complaint was sustained. The failure to turn on the body cam initially was sustained, even though once he realized that he was dealing with somebody, he later turned on his body cam.
Plus, in the same report, it says NA when it comes to witnesses. According to the body camera footage alone, there were at least 2 other police officers on scene, not to mention the female detained.
That's another head scratcher, because the witnesses are police officers. And if they're not available on a particular day, they're available on another day. And internal affairs, since they work for the Baton Rouge Police Department, internal affairs can and should have access to everyone that works for the department. Officers are required to make administrative statements involving allegations of misconduct, and to say that they were non-available is incorrect. They may have been unavailable on a particular date at a particular time, but that doesn't mean that because they weren't available on that date and time that they should not have been interviewed. Everyone that was there needed to be interviewed in connection with this, particularly when it rises to the level that you're going to demote and suspend a 20-plus year veteran of the police department.
Along with all the collected documents on Dothier's case, I also showed Goyeneche other files provided to me by various sources. Cases of officers when it came to several department policies, but many of these are cases you, the public, have probably never heard of. Without mentioning names, examples like an officer allegedly violating the same policy repeatedly, being written up more than once by their captain, and then no record of the complaint by the superior. When Myron Daniels with Internal Affairs finally addressed it, he cleared the officer of any wrongdoing. In 2019, an officer caught lying by their own body camera when they responded to a home on Stone Gate Drive for a backdoor alarm. When the exact same call came out twice, questions were raised why the responding officer didn't handle it the first time. That officer said there was a lock, so they couldn't get to it the first time, and the second time, a neighbor who had a key unlocked it for the officer. The homeowner, however, said there is no lock on any gate, and no neighbor has any keys. Sources say then Internal Affairs Commander Myron Daniels rejected the case, and the officer's district commander did a conference worksheet. That basically means no record of any wrongdoing in this officer's file.
If you can't trust internal affairs to document accurately the misconduct of officers, then any and every discipline, and by that matter the converse of that, any discipline that wasn't rendered involving a complaint, calls into question whether justice was really achieved. So this really gets to the, cuts to the core of the integrity of the Baton Rouge Police Department. If Internal Affairs is basing their investigations on a double standard, on favoritism, and or retaliating against people that are at odds with quote-unquote the administration.
In 2018, another case caught on the officer's body camera and written up by the officer's superior. The allegations, according to this report, say the officer's video showed them twice, quote, to grab suspect and push him against the wall and grab him by the throat. It goes on to say the officer lost their temper, quote, to the point of yelling profane words no less than 8 times, and, quote, threaten additional force to include use of a taser. The officer was suspended for some time. And then the case of an officer who was assigned to Mayor Broom's security detail. Taking a close look at that officer's timesheets and matching it to Mayor Broom's calendar, there seemed to be several inconsistencies. For example, February 12, 2018, the officer marks working a mayor event from midnight to 4 a.m., but her calendar is completely empty for that day. The same for April 22nd, overtime for a 15-hour day for a mayor event that started at 7 a.m. till 10 that night. Her calendar, however, empty again for that Sunday. June 1st, 2018, this officer worked 13 hours overtime for a mayor event from 4 a.m. till 5 p.m., but seems the mayor wasn't even in town this day. Her calendar shows her out of town the entire day. The list of examples for this particular officer goes on and on. The officer was investigated and faced 4 violations. According to these documents, when it came to conduct unbecoming of an officer, quote, Chief Paul has determined the complaint to be not sustained, meaning there wasn't enough evidence for this specific violation. As for the 3 other violations, falsification of documents, truthfulness, and carrying out orders, all the most serious of violations, quote, Chief Paul has determined that you are exonerated of the allegations made in this matter, meaning the allegations are completely false and this officer is cleared of any wrongdoing.
If internal affairs in any law enforcement agency is compromised, if their integrity is in any way questioned, it undermines everything within that department. And it also adversely affects the public's trust in law enforcement.
So even if it is internal affairs, does that eventually go back to the chief himself?
Everything stops with him.
So is there merit to what Dothier is alleging, that there truly is disparate discipline within the Baton Rouge Police Department with Chief Paul and members of his administration in the know?
I'm a former prosecutor. I'd want to see more, but where there's smoke, there's fire. And I think that there's enough information here that demands that the allegations be investigated in greater detail. So I think that the ball is in civil services court right now.
Is there a violation of BPRD policies and possibly criminal law that you see?
There are criminal applications to some of this. And it might mean at some point, if you can document actionable misconduct, internal affairs, by the Internal Affairs Division, civil service and or the entity that is conducting the investigation could potentially request that an independent criminal investigation be launched.
Now, earlier this week, I did reach out to the Baton Rouge Police Department asking for interviews or comments specifically from Chief Paul, Deputy Chief Myron Daniels, and or the Internal Affairs Investigator Arseni Beard. So far, I have not heard a word back. I also sent an email to Mayor Broom's office asking for an interview or comment from her regarding a possible disparate discipline within BPRD. I did get a notification back that my email was read, but not even a response to that email. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe on my YouTube channel, Unfiltered with Kieran.